Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Chanda Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Chanda Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Okay. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So I think this microphone is working today. We use them out here so that those who are watching, not here, they can hear the other side of what happens in the temple room when we're doing the class. Everybody's chanting the verses and everything. Otherwise, you just kind of hear me, and then it's a blank space. But anyway, when we actually chant the verses individually, we could chant right into there, and I think we got it today. So we're reading today from the Srimad-bhagavatam, Canto 8, Chapter 5, Text 48. Chapter is called "The Demigods Appeal to the Lord for Protection." This is we're almost to the end of the chapter. We have 2 more verses after this for this chapter. The demigods appeal to the Lord for protection. Navama karma kalpopi vipalayeshwararpitaha kalpate purusha shaiva sahyatma dayito hitaha navama karma kalpopi vipalayeshwararpitaha kalpate purusha shaiva sahyatma dayito hitaha navama karma kalpopi vipalayeshwararpitaha kalpate purusha shaiva sahyatma dayito hitaha
Navama karma kalpopi vipalayeshwararpitaha kalpate purusha shaiva sahyatma dayito hitaha navama karma kalpopi vipalayeshwararpitaha
kalpate purusha shaiva sahyatma dayito hitaha navama karma kalpopi vipalayeshwararpitaha kalpate purusha shaiva sahyatma dayito hitaha. Word synonyms. They say for best sound about this far away from the microphone when you share. Not. Avamaha, very little or insignificant. Karma, activities. Kalpaha, rightly executed. Api, even. Vipalaya, go in vain. Ishvara arpitaha, because of being dedicated to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Kalpate, it is so accepted. Purushasha, of all persons. Eva, indeed. Saha, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He, certainly. Atma, the Supersoul, the Supreme Father. Dayataha, extremely dear. Hitaha, beneficial. Translations. Activities dedicated to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, even if performed in small measure, never go in vain. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, being the Supreme Father, is naturally very dear and always ready to act for the good of the living entities. Repeat after me. Activities dedicated to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, even if performed in small measure, never go in vain. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, being the Supreme Father, is naturally very dear and always ready to act for the good of the living entities. Srila Prabhupada purport. In the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, verse 40, the Lord says, Swalpam apyasya dharmasya trayate mahato vayat. This dharma, devotional service, is so important that even if performed to a very small, almost negligible extent, it can give one the supreme result. There are many instances in the history of the world in which even a slight service rendered to the Lord has saved a living entity from the greatest danger. Ajamil, for example, was saved by the Supreme Personality of Godhead from the greatest danger, that of going to hell. He was saved simply because he chanted the name Narayan at the end of his life. When Ajamil chanted the holy name of the Lord, Narayan, he did not chant knowingly. Actually, he was calling his youngest son, whose name was Narayan. Nonetheless, Lord Narayan took this chanting seriously, and thus Ajamil achieved the result of Ante Narayana Smriti, remembering Narayan at the end of life. If one somehow or other remembers the holy name of Narayan, Krishna, or Rama at the end of life, he immediately achieves the transcendental result of going back home, back to Godhead. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is actually the only object of our love. As long as we are in the material world, we have so many desires to fulfill. But when we come in touch with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, we immediately become perfect and fully satisfied, just as a child is fully satisfied when he comes to the lap of his mother. Dhruva Maharaj went to the forest to achieve some material result by austerity and penance. But when he actually saw the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he said, I do not want any material benediction. I am completely satisfied. Even if one wants some material benefit from serving the Supreme Personality of Godhead, this can be achieved extremely easily, without hard labor. Therefore, Shastra recommends Akama sarvakamo va moksha kama udharati tivrena bhakti yogena yajeta purushang param. Quote, whether one desires everything or nothing, or desires to merge into the existence of the Lord, he is intelligent only if he worships Lord Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, by remembering transcendental loving service. That's from the Srimad-bhagavatam, 2nd Canto, 3rd chapter, 10th verse. Even if one has material desires, one can undoubtedly achieve what he wants by rendering service to the Lord. Om Ajnana Timiranda Shagana Jana Shalakaya Chakshurun Viditam Nina Tasmai Shri Gurve. There's several points here. The Lord Krishna, who really wants that we engage in devotional service, that's what he really wants. He gives a lot of opportunities. The Vedas give a lot of opportunities for so many things. The demigod worship, different sacrifices, so many things that you can do to get the material things you want. But Lord Krishna wants us to engage in devotional service, and he so much encourages that if he sees that we do even a little bit of service, what can we do anyway? But if we do just a little bit of service, even, then he becomes so pleased and gives us so much spiritual benefit. And in the case of, she'll probably gives the example in the purport about Ajamil. You know who Ajamil is? You know who Ajamil is? Okay, so we'll tell the story. You obviously know who Ajamil is. So there's a history in the Srimad-bhagavatam about Ajamil. Ajamil was a Brahmana boy. When he was young, he was actually a devotee, a Brahmana devotee, Vaishnava Brahmana. But he got distracted. He got distracted by saw a low-class person, a prostitute, basically, and engaged in those kind of activities, and he became distracted from his spiritual pursuit, and actually associated with her, and gradually was living with her, and basically had a lot of children with her also. Okay, so his whole life, and to maintain that family, he started engaging in all kinds of sinful activities and stealing, and his whole life became completely spoiled. So after many years of being in that situation, he was very old. He was just on the verge of dying. It was deathbed, as we say. He was just getting on the verge of dying. And then, because he had been so sinful, then the servants of Lord Yamaraj, called the Yamadutas, they came and they were going to take him away. They come with a kind of subtle net. They grab the soul, or grab the soul in his subtle body, and take him to hell. That was to be his destiny. So of course he saw them. These Yamadutas are ugly. There's a picture in the Srimad-bhagavatam just showing what they actually look like according to the description. Not this volume, no. But there's a pic. But anyway, they're very ugly, and they were just on the verge of ripping him out of his material body in this way. And so he was very much afraid, as everyone is in that condition, and in his fear and anxiety, he called out to who was most dear to him at that time, who was his youngest son, who he had, because of his previous Brahmana type life, he named his son accordingly. He named his son Narayan. So he was calling his dear son Narayan, but as soon as he called his dear son Narayan, the Vishnu Dutas, they were the servants of Lord Vishnu, they came, and of course they were much more powerful than the Yamadutas, and they stopped it. He said, No, you go away. You go away. You cannot take him. And why? Because he chanted the names of the Lord. Now so Srila Prabhupada was explaining he was not chanting the names of the Lord. He was not thinking I'm chanting the names of the Lord. His idea was he's calling his son. He was just totally in fear. But nonetheless he did chant the name of the Lord, and it wasn't like he was planning for his whole life that, okay, I can do all my nonsense activities, and then at the time when I'm going to die, I'll chant the name of God, and then I'll be saved. There is a story somewhere about somebody who tried to do that, and it didn't work, because in the end he also, there's a story, I don't know where the story came from. I'm sure Prabhupada told it or where it came from, but it's instructive. Some man who knew the science, you remember God at the time of death, and you go back to Godhead, but he had no intention of spending his life practicing, Krishna conscious activities. So he had a plan. He had sons, and he named all his sons names of God, like we do. Or we have our initiated names are like that, and devotees who have children, they usually give names like that. So so he had all these sons, but he went on with his life with doing all his sense gratification activities, nothing in the service of the Lord. But he had a plan that at the time before I'm about ready to die, I'll call all my sons together by their names of godly names, and then I'll be saved, and I'll go back to the spiritual world. He's trying to get the best of everything, the best sense gratification here, and then get liberated in the end. But at the end, when he's calling all his sons together, there's Krishna Das and Vishnu Das and Govinda Das and like that. But so one of them was late coming, and so he's saying, like, so where the hell is Krishna Das? and then he left. So what's he thinking? He's not thinking Krishna Das. He's thinking hell. And of course he was trying to cheat, but he got cheated like that. And so he went to hell. But in Ajamil's case, he was not planning like that. He was very fallen. He had become very fallen. But because he, in his great anxiety, without any particular plan to cheat God, he was just calling his son, but his son's name was the name of God, and therefore he was saved. And then later on, these Yamadutas who were about to take him, because they had never been defeated before. I mean, nobody stops the Yamadutas when they come to do their job. So when they were defeated, they were a little frustrated, because what's happening. So they went back to their master, who, as far as they were concerned, was actually God. They didn't know otherwise. And they asked him what has happened. How could they do this? Who are these people? The Yamadutas, the Vishnudutas. And so Yamaraj explained what happened, and he gave the instruction that anyone who chants the names of God, you don't touch them. So like that. And then Ajamil, so he didn't die right then, but he took it very seriously. Like a wake-up call, as we call it. And then he went on to where? Haridwar, I think. Yeah, Haridwar. And then he spent the last of his life really absorbed in Krishna conscious activities, and realizing his mistake, wasting his whole life like that. But he spent his last, I don't know how much time he had, because he was already old. But he spent the last part of his life engaged seriously in Krishna conscious activities, and then he went back to the spiritual world like that. So the point here related to this verse and purport is that even if we do a little something, then there's so much benefit. And if we do that little something, just if we remember Krishna at the time of death, somehow or other, then we will go back to the spiritual world. But of course, at the time of death, it's not an easy time. It's described that as we're dying, and the mind becomes very bewildered. The bodily functions don't work. You can't do anything. You're just really at the mercy of God, actually. And you will think about what was most dear to you during your lifetime. In the case of Ajamil, who was most dear to him was a son who fortunately was named Narayan. But when we practice Krishna consciousness, what we're trying to do is become so absorbed in Krishna through devotional service, through chanting, which is also devotional service, of course, through whatever spiritual activities we do. We're trying to become so absorbed in the Lord's service that at the time of death, when things become more difficult, that Jai Shri Gauranitai, Shri Radha, Petra Bihari, Jagannath, Balaram, Lady Subhadra, Vinashigare, Prahlad Maharaj, Ki Jai. So we try to become so absorbed in devotional service now and continue in that way up until the end of this life, so that at the end of our life, what is most dear to us will certainly be Lord Krishna. If we and Srila Prabhupada promises like that. If we chant our japa, we chant our 16 rounds a day, follow the 4 regulative principles, just keep engaged in devotional service. These are the main 2 things because we promised with these things in our initiation vows, that somehow or other remembering Krishna all the way through to the end of life, we don't give up Krishna consciousness, and we're not aspiring for, okay, I'll give a day for Krishna, and then I'll give a day for Lord Shiva, and I'll give a day for Lord Indra, like that. No, we give it to Lord Krishna. So if we do like that, which is not actually that difficult, if we have some seriousness, and we do that until the end of our life, then we will Krishna will make sure that we remember him. Krishna will force himself into our mind if it's not already, we're not completely fixed. He'll make sure that we remember him at that time, if we've given our whole life to him in that way. So that was one point here. Another point, akama sarva kama va moksha kama udaradi tibrena bhakti yogena yajeta purusham puram. So it means that if akama, if one has no desire, material desires, or sarva kama means all material desires, moksha kama means desire for liberation, like merging in the Brahman effulgence, merging in the white light. Udarati, if you have no desire, all desires, or desire for liberation, but you should engage in any case, one should engage in bhakti yoga. One should engage in the service of the Lord. And if we have material desires, but we are seriously engaged in Krishna's service, then Krishna will do one of 2 things. He'll either purify that desire so we don't want it, so we give up that particular desire, or he may give us that desire if he sees that it will be favorable for us to advance in spiritual life. Whereas worshiping the demigods, you can also get your material desires by doing those kind of things, but it will not help you to advance in spiritual life. It's like sort of a cheating process. Because because whatever the demigods give, they get from their ability to give that, they're getting it from Lord Krishna. So why not go to Lord Krishna and just serve him? And so we should try to serve without any desire, any material desire, any material motivation. But the desire to go back to the spiritual world is not considered a material motivation. You may say, "Oh, this would be really good, but is this just a material? Is this just another material desire?" No, it's not a material motivation, because this is what we're supposed to be doing. Lord Krishna wants us to go back to the spiritual world, like that. And there's one other point that was here, because we have little time here. Dhruva Maharaj. Know who Dhruva Maharaj is? No. So Dhruva Maharaj was a son. His father was a king, King Uttanapada. Uttanapada. He was one of the right in the early part of the universe, first generations. So King Uttanapada was a king, and King Uttanapada had, as far as the history goes, in the Srimad-bhagavatam, it mentions 2 wives, which was not uncommon. Kings had many wives sometimes. So at least he had 2 wives. There were 2 wives that are mentioned in this history. The name of one was Suruchi. Yeah, Sunita and Suruchi. So Suruchi was and Dhruva had a brother, or you call him a half brother, but different. Suruchi had one son, with the king, and the Suniti had a son who was Dhruva Maharaj. So as the history goes, in the Srimad Bhagavatam, what was the but what was his name? The sons, the brothers. Uttama, I think. Yeah. He was an Uttama, wasn't he? Yeah, okay. So the brother of Dhruva Maharaj was named as Uttama. And they were both children. They 4 or 5 years old or so. So Uttama was sitting up on the lap of the father's lap, the king's lap. And of course, Dhruva was thinking, "I'll be up too." So he was trying to get up on the lap of the father, and the father had no problem with it personally, but the king had the other wife, Uttama's wife, was more a favorite, and he was a little bit henpecked, as they say. So when Dhruva tried to get on the king's lap, then his what do you call it, stepmother, the mother of the other boy, she said, "No, Dhruva, you cannot sit on his lap, because you are not my son. You cannot sit on your father's lap, because you are not my son. If you want to sit on his lap, you have to die and be born again as my son, and then you can sit on his lap." She was a little off, but anyway, that's what happened. So he was very upset. Can you imagine? And so he's crying, and he runs off to his own mother, who was somewhere else. And he tells her the story, what happened, and what can I do? She says, "Well, I cannot do anything. What can I say? Your king is more attracted to the other wife, so he won't listen to me." but she says that people, there's nothing I can do, but if you want help, you need to ask God. Oh, and so Dhruva, little kid, he says, okay, where can I find God? I'm going to ask him to help me with this. And Dhruva actually had this big desire. After what happened, he's thinking, I want to have my own kingdom, better than my father's, better than my grandfather's. His grandfather's Lord Brahma, right? Better than my own father, better than Lord Brahma's kingdom, Lord Brahma's kingdom, which is like topmost in the universe, material universe. So he's thinking like this, and he's thinking, where can I find God so I can ask him for this, for this? And his mother, just says, well, I don't know, but I know a lot of times saintly persons go off to the forest and look for God, which means they go off, perform austerities, devotional service, so like that, and they eventually come to God realization. So she said like that. Sometimes they go off to the forest looking for God. So he was very determined. He was just a little kid, but he is very, very strong material desire. It was not a spiritual desire, it was a material desire. But he was thinking, I'm going to find God. So in the middle of the night, he disappeared from the palace. He went out on his own to the dark forest where the wild animals and everything were there. But he went out there looking for God. He had no idea where to look for God. He had no idea how he was supposed to look for God. And people don't just go out there and God's standing there. They go out there, perform austerities like that, and God reveals Himself to them in time. But he went out there like that, and then while he was looking for God, then the great sage Narada Muni came. Narada Muni? We talked about Narada Muni before. The Narada Muni came there. Of course, he understood what Dhruva was doing, and he also understood that he was a very sincere soul. But he tested him anyway, and he says, Dhruva, what are you doing here? I'm looking for God. He said, No, Dhruva, you're too young. Just go back home and play, and you come out. People come out to look for God when they're very old. But Dhruva said he wouldn't accept that. He absolutely would not accept that. I'm going to find God. So then Narada Muni saw that he was pretty determined. So he gave him a mantra, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, wasn't it? And he said you gave him different instructions, but basically he was to constantly chant that, and then over the next 6 months, just 6 months, Dhruva performed, I don't remember exactly the breakdown of his austerity, that he was eating fruits and roots and like that, which you can find out in the forest. And then he's eating the leaves, just the leaves off of the trees that fell around him. And then he was just drinking water. I think each month he went to became more severe austerities. And then at one point he actually stopped breathing, just like part of the austerity. Okay, I'm not going to breathe. When he stopped breathing, the whole universe, because he became very powerful by that point, by these austerities, and by not breathing, the demigods, everyone was feeling it, and at that point, the Lord came and appeared before him, and when Dhruva saw the Lord in front of him, because he was meditating, trying to meditate on him and so on. But when he saw the Lord in front of him, then he said, and the Lord actually came to offer him any benediction that he wanted. But Dhruva said, basically, she'll probably paraphrase this here. He said, I came out here looking for pieces of broken glass. It's something useless. You're looking for pieces of broken glass, but now I found the greatest gem, because he actually saw God. And he didn't want to take any kind of benediction at that point. He was completely satisfied, which goes along with this verse, Akama Sara Kama La. He went out there, but because he's worshipped God, now he didn't want the thing he wanted before. And but at that point, he was told, the Lord told him, okay, now you've already, you've seen me, you have realization of me. Now you go back to your family. And when he did, and everyone could see that everyone had thought he had died, because for 6 months they hadn't seen him. He was just gone. But when he came back, everyone was very happy to see him, and they could see that he had actually become very, very advanced and spiritually advanced during this time. And so at that point, his father, who was already old, very old, he went off to the forest to perform austerities and so on, giving up his kingdom and everything. And Dhruva took over. And there's a lot of, there's several chapters on this. But all in the end, just to cut to the end because we are at the end of time, he became the king. He ruled the kingdom for the Satya Yuga. So he ruled the king for 32,000 years, as I remember. 36,000 years. Satya Yuga people lived to be 100,000 years old. So he ruled for 36,000 years, and at that point in his life, he also went off to well, not yet. He went off somewhere to perform his austerities again. Now, he had no real need for performing, but he was the king. He had been the king, so he also had to show example. This is what the king does as a king, and this is what the king does to show what people should be doing at least by the end of their life. So he was off performing his austerities and so on in a solitary place. And then in due course of time, I don't know how long the period of time it was, I don't think that was given. In due course of time, when he was performing his daily sadhana, the Vishnu-dus, the servants of the Lord, actually Nanda and Sunanda, I mentioned, that they came in a vimana. Vimana is like a Vaikuntha airplane. It doesn't run on loud, noisy jet engines and those kind of things. It's a very pleasing vehicle to ride in. So they came to take him. So he, seeing them, when he completed whatever his daily activities were. Just we have chanting our rounds and so on. So he had his own program, and he'd been doing all along. So even when he saw them, he didn't immediately go to them. He completed his morning activities, and then he approached the airplane, the vimana, and he bowed down and showed respect to the servants of Lord Vishnu, and then he circumambulated the plane. And while he was circumambulating the plane, his material body, transformed into a completely spiritual body fit for the spiritual world. And then it came time to get onto the plane. So death personified came to him, or came in front of him, but he actually bowed down, and Dhruva stepped on his head and got onto the airplane, which means death is assisting him in going back to the spiritual world. But where he was actually taken, because he originally had done all these austerities to get a kingdom better than his fathers, his grandfathers, and anyone else in the universe. So he got that, because there's a planet called, in the Srimad-bhagavatam is known as Dhruva Loka, we know it as the pole star, like the North Star. So that's actually a spiritual planet. And it's actually a spiritual planet, and that's his planet. So that planet is not destroyed when everything else is destroyed. It's spiritual. So that spiritual planet is definitely a better kingdom than anything else, including Lord Brahma's planet, which is material, like that. So he got the best of everything simply by worshiping the Lord. So we also have the opportunity to get the best of everything, if not in this lifetime, at least at the end of this lifetime. But and Krishna gives us a little here and a little there to help us keep that faith in the process, so that we keep enthusiastic and keep going forward. But at the end, the result will be to go back home, back to Godhead. Are there any questions, comments?
Yes, you mentioned before that in this day and age, all other forms of yoga, they do not work, only bhakti yoga.
Yes.
It's
the only one that's practical for this age, yes. I'm saying, yeah, the other yoga systems like that are not practical to become self-realized in this age. Yes, we have our process, which is for us fallen Kali Yugites, like that. But the Hatha yoga system, the Ashtanga yoga system, the big sacrifices, the deity worship on the level of what it was in Dwapara Yuga. These are not practical for the people in general to become God conscious by themselves. Is that the question?
Yes.
Okay. No questions for those who are watching online. There were 2 this morning. So we'll end here for now. Tomorrow we continue with Srimad-bhagavatam. Right? Srila Prabhupada ki jai.